Before we begin these stories, you might want to turn on a light, because trains travel through some of the darkest and loneliest places in the world. Empty stations, abandoned tracks, and tunnels where no one has walked for years. Most people think trains are safe, just a simple ride from one place to another. But sometimes, something strange happens along those tracks, something that cannot be explained. These are 3 true, scary train stories that happened late at night. Story 1. The Last Passenger. Michael was traveling home late one night after visiting family in another city. The train he boarded was the last one scheduled before morning. The station was nearly empty when he arrived. A few flickering lights hung above the platform, and the cold wind moved quietly through the long tunnels of the station. When the train finally arrived, Michael stepped inside and looked around. The entire train car was empty. He sat down near the middle and placed his bag beside him. As the train began moving, the quiet sound of the wheels against the tracks filled the car. For the first 20 minutes, nothing unusual happened. But then Michael noticed something strange. At the far end of the train car, someone was sitting in one of the seats. Michael was confused. He was certain the train car had been empty when he entered. The man was wearing an old coat and a dark hat that covered most of his face. Michael assumed the man must have boarded from another door. He didn't think much of it, but after several minutes, Michael noticed something unsettling. The man hadn't moved, not once. He hadn't checked a phone. He hadn't looked out the window. He was just sitting there, perfectly still. Michael tried to ignore it, but eventually, curiosity got the better of him. He stood up and slowly walked toward the other end of the train. The closer he got, the colder the air felt. When he was only a few seats away, the man suddenly spoke, without turning his head. "You shouldn't be on this train tonight." Michael stopped walking. "What do you mean?" he asked. The man slowly lifted his head. His face looked pale in the dim train lights. Then he said something that made Michael's heart drop. "This train never reaches its destination." Suddenly, the train lights flickered. For a moment, the entire car went dark. When the lights came back on, the man was gone. His seat was empty. Michael looked around the train car. No one else was there. But the train had not stopped, and the doors had never opened. Story 2. The Abandoned Tunnel. Carlos worked as a railway maintenance technician. His job often required him to inspect old train tunnels during the night when the tracks were empty. One night he was assigned to check a tunnel that hadn't been used in years. The tunnel was located deep in the mountains, far away from any town. When Carlos arrived, the place felt strangely quiet. Even the wind outside seemed to stop near the tunnel entrance. He turned on his flashlight and stepped inside. The beam of light stretched across the long, dark tunnel walls. The air inside was cold and damp. Carlos walked slowly along the tracks, checking the rails and taking notes. Everything seemed normal, until he heard something. A faint metallic sound echoing through the tunnel. At first he thought it might be loose equipment, but then the sound repeated. It sounded like footsteps, slow footsteps walking on the metal tracks. Carlos stopped and listened carefully. The tunnel was supposed to be completely empty. Yet the footsteps continued. Step, step, step. They were coming from deeper inside the tunnel. Carlos called out, "Hello." His voice echoed against the walls. No answer. But the footsteps stopped. For several seconds the tunnel was silent. Then suddenly Carlos heard something that made his blood run cold. The distant sound of a train horn. Carlos froze. That couldn't be possible. No trains had used this tunnel for decades. The horn echoed again. Louder this time. Then the ground beneath his feet began to vibrate slightly. Carlos quickly turned and ran toward the tunnel exit. But when he looked behind him, the tunnel was still empty. No train, no lights, just darkness, and yet the sound of the train kept getting closer. Carlos never returned to that tunnel again, and the railway company eventually sealed it permanently. Story 3. The train that shouldn't exist. Late one night, a woman named Sarah was waiting at a quiet train station outside the city. Her train was supposed to arrive at 1:30 a.m. The platform was nearly deserted. Only a few dim lights illuminated the long stretch of empty tracks. Sarah checked the schedule board several times. Her train was delayed, so she sat down on a bench and waited. Around 1:45 a.m., she heard something strange. A train approaching, but the schedule board didn't show any arrivals. Still, the sound grew louder. Soon, an old train slowly rolled into the station. Sarah noticed something unusual immediately. The train looked extremely old, almost like something from another era. The paint was faded, the windows were dark, and there were no passengers visible inside. The train stopped in front of the platform. The doors slowly opened, but no one stepped out. Sarah hesitated. Maybe this was a replacement train. She stepped closer to one of the doors and looked inside. The train car was empty, completely empty. Then she heard a voice behind her. "Don't get on that train." Sarah turned around. An elderly station worker stood a few feet away. His expression looked serious. "That train doesn't stop here," he said quietly. Sarah looked confused. "But it just did," she replied. The man shook his head slowly. "No, it didn't." Sarah turned back toward the tracks. Her heart nearly stopped. The train was gone. The tracks in front of the station were completely empty, as if the train had never been there at all. Trains travel thousands of miles every day, through cities, through forests, through tunnels where sunlight has never reached. Most of the time they carry ordinary passengers going about their normal lives. But sometimes, something strange rides those rails. Something that appears only in the quiet hours of the night. And if you ever find yourself waiting alone at a station after midnight, you might want to think carefully before boarding the next train that arrives.